Hi, Rusty here again, Cosmic Comics, here today, obviously, to talk about the 9th annual Cosmic Madness Tournament. It is the required reading Rumble, and it is comic books. It is comic books. We've never done comic books before, so we thought we'd try something new this year. And in the past, we've said greatest superhero. We've said greatest team. We've said best woman superhero. I'm not really going to use those terms this year. There's only 32 comics to pick from. There's only 32 spots. 8 DCs, 8 Marvels, 8 Image, 8 everything else. Are these the 32 best comic books of all time? Wow, there's an argument. You could make thousands to choose from, is my point. There's so many to choose from this year. I'm not going to say these are the 32 best comics of all time. I am going to say they are required reading, and I hope you are ready to rumble. Every one of these books, we think, me, Andy, David, think you should read. They're all great, and they're all totally worth reading. And you're going to vote on which one you think is best of these choices. And we tried to pick stuff that was newer, readily available, still sort of mattered. I mean, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did fantastic stuff in the 60s, and you might say some of those are the best comics of all time. We're not talking about those, okay? We're talking about current, modern comics. There's only 32 to pick from, and these are the ones that we choose.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Today we are here to announce the DC contestants, the 8 DC contestants for the 9th annual 2018 Cosmic Madness Tournament. It is required reading Rumble is the name of the tournament. 4 brackets. The DC bracket we're going to announce right now. These are the ones that you get to choose from. Alphabetical order. It is in alphabetical order. First up is All-Star Superman. It was a 12-issue series published in 2005, written by Grant Morrison, art by Frank Quitely. Did win the Eisner Award for Best New Series when it came out. It's not really set in DC continuity, and it is a complete story all to itself. Lex Luthor's, he's a little crazy. He has a crazy scheme. He wants to overwhelm Superman's cells with massive amounts of solar radiation, which means that Superman has 1 year to live. I mean, the book does touch on all aspects of the Superman mythos. Jimmy Olsen, Bizarro, Fortress of Solitude, Krypton, everything you want to know about Superman is in it. It really does sum up so much of the Superman mythos, even though it's not set in DC continuity. And while it is a Grant Morrison book and has plenty of wackiness to it, it is easy to read and enjoy. All-Star Superman is the first entrance into the DC bracket. I do have notes. You can fact check me if you want. I figure I'll be about 75% correct. See what happens. Second up in the DC bracket is Batman the Black Mirror. Now this originally came out in Detective Comics 871 to 881. It is totally set in DC continuity. It was the last detective story before the New 52 reboot, and I do believe it is the first Batman story that Scott Snyder did. Fact check that if you want. Batman is back from the dead at this point, but he's off Batman Incorporating, so Nightwing and Dick Grayson is still Batman at this point. I don't know if you knew that, but Dick Grayson did assume the mantle of the Bat for a while Batman was dead, and he's still doing it here. The basic premise of the story is that Commissioner Gordon wants Nightwing to reopen his advanced Batcave lab to help them solve crimes, which he does. That's part of it. There's plenty of crimes that he helps the cops solve. And then Commissioner Gordon's son gets reintroduced, James Gordon Jr., and he's a psycho killer. So you have these two stories, the Commissioner Gordon's son story and then the solving other crime story for Nightwing. and they do intertwine, and they all end up as one big story at the end, and it's really cool and awesome. And not only that, the Nightwing action, or the Batman action, sorry, is fantastic in it. I do call it rock and roll Batman. He escapes from a car crusher, which is just incredible. It's definitely a high octane story, definitely a psychological thriller, and is totally required reading. Batman the Black Mirror is number 2 on the DC list. The next entrant in the DC bracket is another Batman book, Batman Hush. Hush came out in 2002, originally published in Batman 608 to 619. It is one of DC's all-time favorite comics. They've published it in a trade. They've published it in a hardcover. They've published it in an absolute. They've published it in a 15th anniversary edition, in a Noir edition. They'll publish it anyhow, anyway, anywhere. DC loves it. We do too. I mean, it's great. It's a simple story. Batman sets out on a mission to discover who is Hush, mysterious new villain that comes on the scene. You know, and then things get crazy. It's a wacky, crazy Batman book. All the characters in the Batman universe are in it. Catwoman, Poison Ivy, Riddler. I mean, you name it. They're all in here. Gorgeous artwork by Jim Lee. And on a side note, it does, at the very end, there's a little Catwoman Batman romance scene in here that this book was 15 years old. They were kissing back then. Took them a long time. Now they're getting married, and you know I'm waiting for my invitation in the mail. Next up for the DC bracket, we have Blackest Night. We did want to get a Green Lantern book in the tournament. Jeff Johns' book. I mean, Jeff Johns reinvented Green Lantern back in 2005 with Green Lantern Rebirth, and then he wrote it for the next 10 or 12 years. He was really established the Green Lantern character, Hal Jordan, and the Green Lantern Corps that we know today. He's responsible for all of that, and Blackest Night is probably the biggest story that they've done. It is a crossover. It is pure DC continuity. Lots of tie-ins, and you can read, you know, 80 issues of Blackest Night if you want. This is the main series. It does stand alone. You can just read that and enjoy it. As the name suggests, it does introduce us to the Black Lanterns, which are basically zombie lanterns. A lot of people had a problem with that. I didn't. Zombie Aquaman, zombie Hawkman, zombie Martian Manhunter. I think it's great. So, welcome to try it out. Whether you like zombies or not, great Green Lantern book. Next up, it is The Dark Knight Returns. I mean, what are you going to say about The Dark Knight? Everyone should know this one. It was originally published as a prestige format 4-issue miniseries back in 1986. I mean, it just owns a special place in comic book history. For good or bad, Frank Miller took Batman to a deeper, darker place, and the comic book industry's never really been the same since. I mean, if this tournament was actually about the best, the greatest comics of all time, The Dark Knight could very well be a #1 seed. It is absolutely required reading. I'm sure most of you have heard of this one. You definitely got to read it if you haven't, or reread it if you have. Next up, Flashpoint. Now, Flashpoint had to be on the list. Time and place. It just had to make it. It is a tie-in, and wow, is it in DC continuity. I mean, The Button that came out a couple years ago, last year, totally deals with Flashpoint. Doomsday Clock, you're reading that? It's going to have to address Flashpoint at some point. I mean, Flashpoint came out in 2011. It was right before the New 52 started. It is the book that combined the Wildstorm universe and the Vertigo universe into DC universe proper. It's how you get the Hellblazer book in the DC universe. It's how you get the Swamp Thing book in the DC universe. It's how you get the Wildstorm characters in the DC universe. It's that important. It's huge. And it's still, we're not done with Flashpoint by any chance. Doomsday Clock has got to address it. We'll see what happens. We'll see what crazy Mr. Dr. Manhattan has to say about Flashpoint and the New 52 at some point. I'm looking forward to it. This book is also where you really get Thomas Wayne, Batman's daddy. You've seen him popping up a little bit. This book is really where he comes from, too. It's an alternate history, alternate world. And there is great. Aquaman and Wonder Woman have a huge fight that decimates Western Europe in this thing. It's super cool, and it totally matters. Next up, Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come was originally published back in 1996. It was a 4-issue prestige miniseries. It is an Elseworlds title. Elseworlds, what if, alternate universe, alternate whatever. You can do anything in an Elseworlds book. I mean, this might be the best Elseworlds ever published. It's totally beautifully painted by Alex Ross. Little inside shot for you. I don't know if you can see that. You're welcome to flip through any of these comics while you're here at the store. Basically, the older heroes have retired. Superman's old. He wants to retire. Magog comes on the scene as the new hero, but he's mean and bad and starts killing people. So Superman returns 10 years later with a new group of heroes to try and defeat them. I mean, Batman's involved. Wonder Woman's involved. Everyone in the DC universe is involved. It's very large scale, beautiful, self-contained, and excellent. Kingdom Come. All right, so the 8th and final entry in the DC bracket for the 9th annual Cosmic Madness Tournament, the required reading rumble, is The Watchmen. Now, I didn't have a lot to say about The Dark Knight, and I don't have a lot to say about The Watchmen. Everyone should know this one. It was also published in 1986, 12 issues. 1986 is a pretty big year in comic books. If you want to talk about comic book history, Alan Moore wrote it. He cranked it up a notch, and much like The Dark Knight, comics have never been the same since. I hope you're reading Doomsday Clock. I mentioned it before. Coming out, it's on issue 3. That's great. There were some before Watchmen books that came out a couple years ago. Those were really good. This is an all-time classic. And only one DC book gets to come out to the final 4. This is the DC bracket. So you can start thinking right now. Dark Knight, Watchmen, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to put in your bracket? Who's going to win? That's the DC bracket for the Reading Rumble.
Let's get ready to